When you think of the most popular Star Wars games right now, you probably have a few in mind, but I can guarantee you won't guess what's sitting at number 1. In this video, we're ranking the top 10 most popular Star Wars games in 2026, and the results might surprise you. We're not just looking at one type of game here. This list includes everything from FPS games to full-scale MMOs, which might interest my core audience of Planetside 2 viewers. Beyond that, there's a huge mix of genres, from single-player story games to multiplayer-heavy experiences. What's even more surprising is the time span. Some of these games were released over 20 years apart, yet they're still competing in terms of player counts in 2026. Now, putting this list together wasn't as simple as checking one source. There's no official concurrent player data from companies like EA or Ubisoft. So for this video, I've combined Steam data with survey-based estimates to get as close as possible to the total player counts across all PC launchers and consoles. Alright, let's get into number 10. Released over 20 years ago and still averaging an estimated 500 concurrent players across all platforms, the classic Star Wars Battlefront 2 is still living rent-free in the minds of millennial gamers like myself. Featuring space battles, playable heroes, and galactic conquest mode, this game is frequently ranked amongst the best Star Wars games ever made. What really made this game stand out at the time was just how much variety it offered. Large-scale ground battles, dedicated space combat, and multiple game modes gave players a huge amount of freedom and replayability, especially for a game released back in 2005. I still have flashbacks to gunning down Aayla Secura in the jungles of Felucia. Now, in 2026, the game is still being played, mostly thanks to mods, private servers, and a small but dedicated community keeping it alive. Player numbers are relatively low compared to modern titles, but the fact that this 20-year-old game has made the list says everything you need to know about its impact and legacy. Coming in at number 9 is Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2: The Sith Lords, developed by Obsidian Entertainment, the same studio behind Fallout New Vegas. Originally released on Xbox and PC in 2004 and later on Switch and mobile, it still pulls an estimated 600 concurrent players thanks to its incredible story and devoted fanbase. This game earned major accolades back in the day: GameSpot Editor's Choice Award for RPG of the Year, IGN Best Story Xbox, and Best RPG PC, and it's easy to see why. The narrative is dark, morally complex, and packed with memorable characters. Even today, the Switch and mobile releases have introduced it to a whole new generation of Star Wars fans. It's shorter than some of the classics, but its storytelling and world building more than make up for it. Next up at number 8 is Star Wars Squadrons, the dogfighting-focused space combat game that carved out a very niche audience. Concurrent player estimates vary between 500 to 1,000, and while the PC player base is small, the console community remains surprisingly active, keeping multiplayer battles alive for fans who love tactical, skill-based gameplay. The single-player campaign is short, about 4 to 6 hours, but it delivers an intense story set right after Return of the Jedi, letting you pilot iconic starfighters for both the New Republic and the remnants of the Empire. Reviews were mixed on Steam, but for the right players, Squadrons hits the sweet spot, a pure Star Wars themed space dogfight simulator that keeps people coming back for multiplayer action. At number 7 is LEGO Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga, a game that proves LEGO and Star Wars are still a perfect match. With releases on multiple platforms, it's easy for families to pick up, and it's the kind of game that makes a perfect birthday or Christmas gift for kids. Steam numbers alone aren't anything to boast about, but when you include console players, estimated concurrent players now sit at around 2,000. The game shines in its replayability thanks to hundreds of collectibles, unlockable characters, and the ability to experience all 9 main Star Wars films in LEGO form. The mix of light-hearted humour and creative level design keeps both kids and long-time Star Wars fans entertained. It's not just for younger players either. The clever jokes and Star Wars references make it enjoyable for adults too. Coming in at number 6 is Star Wars Empire at War, widely regarded as the most popular Star Wars real-time strategy game ever released. Even though it's an older title, the Gold Edition and decades of modding have kept it alive, adding new units, campaigns, and even full fan-made expansions. For a game released in 2006 to still be boasting 2,000 to 3,000 concurrent players and competing with newer Star Wars titles really shows that newer isn't always better. The game's depth is impressive impressive. Large-scale space and ground battles, resource management, and strategic decision-making give it a level of complexity that still appeals to strategy fans today. If you're familiar with Total War or other RTS classics, you'll feel right at home, which explains why it remains so popular with older Star Wars fans, while still competing with games released 20 years later. Empire at War has truly aged like fine Corellian wine. Breaking into the top 5 is Star Wars Outlaws, one of the newest entries on the list and probably one of the most controversial. Released in 2024, it had a lot of hype leading up to launch, but the reception was mixed to say the least. On PC, Steam player counts are relatively low compared to other modern releases, pushing an estimated concurrent player base of around 4,000 to 5,000. Gameplay-wise, it offers an open-world Star Wars experience focused on outlaws, crime syndicates, and exploration, but it didn't quite land for everyone, which explains why it's not higher on the list. For me personally, you can't make a Star Wars game about outlaws and not include Han Solo. Still, being this high despite the criticism shows just how powerful services like Game Pass can really be. At number 4, we've got Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, the game that kicked off the Jedi series and brought single-player Star Wars games back into the spotlight. Released in 2019, this story-driven experience introduced us to Cal Kestis, a Jedi survivor navigating the aftermath of Revenge of the Sith, and for many fans, he quickly became a favourite. What really sets Fallen Order apart is its skill-based combat, with timed dodges, parries, and a system heavily inspired by Souls-like games. It rewards patience and precision rather than button mashing. Combine that with great visuals and a strong narrative, and you've got one of the best single-player experiences in Star Wars ever made. Even without a multiplayer, it still pulls in around 5,000 to 6,000 concurrent players, which says a lot about its replayability and lasting appeal. Kicking off the top 3 is Star Wars Jedi Survivor, the sequel to Fallen Order and the next chapter in Cal Kestis' journey. Released in 2023, it expands on everything that made the first game great: bigger worlds, more abilities, and a deeper, more refined combat system. It keeps that same skill-based, Souls-like formula, but gives players more freedom in how they approach fights and exploration. That said, it didn't launch perfectly. The game received lower Steam ratings compared to Fallen Order, mainly due to performance issues on PC, but despite that, it's still widely considered a great Star Wars game, especially for fans of the series. With around 7,000 concurrent players, it edges ahead of its predecessor and secures its spot in the top 3. Just missing out on the top spot is Star Wars Battlefront 2, one of the biggest multiplayer Star Wars games ever made, and one of the most dramatic comeback stories in gaming history. Released in 2017, it launched with multiplayer, co-op, and a single-player campaign, plus modes like Ewok Hunt that added variety. But the launch was rough. A huge amount of content was locked behind paywalls, and the progression system sparked a massive backlash. Everything changed in 2018, when the developers completely revamped progression, removing those barriers and rebuilding player trust. Since then, it's widely regarded as a fantastic Star Wars experience, especially for fans of large-scale FPS battles. It even saw a massive resurgence in 2025, hitting an estimated 160 to 200,000 concurrent players before settling down back to around 8,000 to 10,000 in 2026, mostly on console via Game Pass. An incredible turnaround story and easily one of the best multiplayer Star Wars games ever made. Taking the number 1 spot is Star Wars The Old Republic, the only true Star Wars MMO, and even in 2026, it's still going strong. Originally released in 2011 as a standalone launcher and only later coming to Steam, even now, Steam likely represents just 25 to 35% of the total player base, with most players still using the original launcher. That makes its estimated concurrent players around 10 to 12,000. Set in the Old Republic era, a time period fans absolutely love, it offers massive storylines, multiple class campaigns, and the long-term progression expected from an MMO. The fact that it's free to play also makes it incredibly accessible. What really sets it apart is longevity. 15 years later, it's still receiving updates, still maintaining a loyal community, and still topping the charts for active Star Wars games. If you want a Star Wars game you can sink hundreds, even thousands of hours to, this is the one. Now, before we wrap things up, there is one game that we need to talk about, because technically it would be number one by a mile. Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. This free-to-play mobile game is estimated to have between 100,000 to 200,000 concurrent players right now, absolutely dwarfing everything else on this list. It's easy to jump into, built around daily challenges and constant progression, and it keeps players logging in every single day. But there's just one problem: it's a mobile game, and we all know mobile gamers aren't real gamers. So that's the top 10 most popular Star Wars games in 2026, and honestly, it surprised me to see so many older releases still being the most played. Let me know down in the comments what's your favourite Star Wars game, did it make the list, and if not, why? If you enjoyed the video, drop a like, subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you in the next one.